This is Sporecast,
where we talk about mold, health, and the spaces that we live in.
Where personal experience meets real conversation.
Where we ask better questions about what's making people sick.
And where no one has to navigate it alone.
Thank you for listening to Sporecast. Before we get started, just a quick note. This podcast is for informational and personal experience purposes only. We are not medical professionals and nothing shared here should be taken as medical advice. We all come from different backgrounds and perspectives, so the opinions shared are our own and may not reflect each other or apply to every situation. Always do your own research and consult with a qualified professional when needed. Thank you and enjoy the show.
So hi, Baylie. Now that we've gotten 15 minutes into talking, are you ready to record a podcast on pans and pandas since we've just done all of this?
Dani, that's so funny.
So for those of you, you know what? We did some catching up in the beginning. We talked a little bit about remediation and your house being healthy enough for your most sensitive person. And then we realized we weren't recording because that's the way that life likes to work. So today, Baylie and I are here to talk about PANS and PANDAS, which for those of you that don't know, PANDAS is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections, which is under the umbrella of PANS, which is pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, which is the broader umbrella diagnosis that can include triggers from other viruses. So
Right.
Baylie, let's chat about this.
Okay. That was so funny. Okay, and you were saying, which one was your daughter diagnosed with?
So we don't really know, to be honest, because, you know, we'll go back to your son's story too, but we had recurrent strep for sure in our family, like frequently. There was a lot of it going around the school. And what actually tipped me off was one of our neighbors' kiddos was diagnosed with PANDAS. But at the time that we had our daughter evaluated, she was positive for mono and she had recently had COVID. But we knew that they had strep pretty frequently, like throughout that year, but her titers weren't super high. So to this day, we don't really, and I think we'll go back and forth and chat on your story, you know, more too, but like, we don't really know which one, like which underlying viral piece was her big trigger, but we know that like strep and viruses in general really set her body off for sure. What about like with your son? What was it like? Like, how did you first realize that something was off, that things were going on?
Okay, so he was officially diagnosed with the PANDAS side. The doctor supposedly ruled out PANS, but I'm not so sure. He did have reoccurring strep, but we didn't realize he was getting strep until probably like a year or two after he was getting strep. Strep in him presents itself differently. He doesn't have like the typical sore throat, and in general, when he gets sick, it's like very mild. Very mild, although he'll get lethargic and kind of a little bit more aggressive, especially now that he has PANDAS. And he also, it presents more in his like anal region and his like tummy.
Yeah.
So anyway, we didn't know that he was having reoccurring strep until a while later. But also, when he was 10 days old, he contracted HSV, which is the herpes virus. And that's a whole other story in itself. But like, he nearly didn't make it as an infant. And so he's had HSV his whole life, and it presents, you know, on his chin, like a chin rash. And so that is something that he also goes through, and he kind of gets sick around that too. Like, he gets lethargic whenever he has an outbreak, and he had an outbreak that lasted just like so long. Like, I can't remember exactly, but it lasted for a lot longer than it should have. And that was around his behavioral changes. So I'm like, I don't know. I could have been the strep, but it also maybe the virus had something to do with it. And then also looking back, we were in mold that we didn't know about until this mold house. So I know that that also plays a part because it lowers your immune system and such. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The chronic viral load is such a thing because it's like, you know, until we moved out of our house, like it was wild to me after we moved, which I'm a little sad we skipped our catch up as we re-recorded this.
I
But,
know.
you know, we'll have to double back to that. But like as we moved, one of the things that was the most shocking to me was like this past winter, my kids were not sick. Like at all. They got like mild colds, and it used to be every single winter we were just high-fiving strep constantly and same. And like again, I'm, you know, like working in the children's hospital, there are so many kids that don't present with strep as sore throat. Like it shows up as diarrhea, vomiting, GI issues, neurocognitive issues, like food intolerance, like all of these bizarre symptoms. And then we swab them and it's strep, you know? So again, I think what you're saying about like the chronic viral load too, where there's other things that are going on, where is there, you know, a common cold, a norovirus, a GI thing, you know, all of these things just take the immune system down enough that some of those things can either be reactivated or just kind of run under the surface and just continually hang out. And mold being a big one that suppresses the immune system, that's one of the most common things you see are kiddos that just can't seem to get a leg up from these viruses. And I don't know about you, but like it was weird too when I explained our situation and how it impacted the five of us completely differently. No two people had the same, like, was it that way for you guys? Because if I break it down, it's like none of us had, we maybe had some overlap, but no one had the same presentation for mold in that sense.
You know what? At first we all presented differently, but now our symptoms are kind of melding together where we're all kind of having the same symptoms. But I'm kind of curious if we have like a bacterial issue as well in the house, that is driving those symptoms, and maybe now our mold load is lower and now we just have that bacterial issue, which is why we're kind of all having the same symptoms. But I don't know. It's so hard to know.
Oh, it's like people don't tell you, like you think it's just remediate and move, or like remediate and like move back in and everything's fine. And when you really get into the weeds on like actino and, you know, endotoxins and all of that stuff and sewer and oh my gosh, it's just people don't realize the breadth of what remediation actually is and how it has to work for your most sensitive person. But like for your
Exactly.
son specifically, like it was mostly kind of this atypical presentation, or what clued you into like pans and pandas specifically?
Okay, so one day out of nowhere, he was wanting to take a bath several times a day. Just like I think up to 10 times a day out of nowhere. We started having to spoon feed him, like he wouldn't feed himself, and he was extremely, extremely picky with food. And not just picky, I say picky, but that's kind of not quite, it doesn't quite explain it. And then when we would try to put him to bed at night, it would take hours and he would just scream and kick the wall. And that's actually what clued me in on pandas, because I was just watching a random Facebook video about this, family where the daughter had pandas and she was screaming and kicking for hours at night as she was trying to go to bed specifically. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a nightmare. That would be horrible. But it kind of, yeah, I had thought back to that video, and I was like, this kind of fits that, but there's no way that could be what's going on with us. But then he started having OCD around our words. So he developed misophonia, which is under the OCD category, where like certain sounds or words or something that another person says really trigger a fight or flight response in his system. And then he would have us do rituals to make him feel better after, we triggered him with our words. So, for example, and this is so weird, it's funny just because, I've never really been able to relate to anybody on these things. But anyway, specifically when my husband says anything with the letter P in it, that triggers my son, and he would have to say, "Did you just say the P word?" And then my husband would have to answer it in the way that my son wanted it to, I don't know, counteract that feeling that he was getting.
Yeah.
So we're like, this is odd. And we kind of just like, at first we were just like, oh, well, we'll just answer it the way that he wants to. This is odd, but then as time goes by, it gets worse, and he starts wanting to lengthen the rituals, and he starts getting triggered by other things that we're saying or doing, and it's just kind of taken over our lives in the span of, I believe it's been 3 years. It's been 3 years, and it's getting a little bit better now, but it was hard to talk to him. Yeah. And he would just constantly be triggered. So that's kind of how it started. And it's formed into different symptoms. Like sometimes he'll just randomly want me to go check and make sure that the door on my car is closed, and he'll have me like open and shut it several times.
Yeah.
Like I could go on and on about symptoms because they change and evolve. But yeah, how about for your daughter? How did it start?
So, what's so crazy is this always, like when I saw this with my daughter, which I'll get back to, I actually, like, I had OCD as a kid, and we lived in this 1800s house, and like I had to walk in and out of the room the same way. If I stuck this arm out the window, I had to stick this one out. I had like rituals, and I had recurrent strep as a kid. And as we know, like I have MCAS, I have, like lots of other weird things. But I think now I'm like, I think this was PANDAS, PANS or PANDAS, because there was so much that was linked with it. But for my daughter, so what clued us in was we had a neighbor that also had twins that lived close to us, that one of her twins was diagnosed with PANDAS and was having just, really erratic behavior, dramatic behavior, like behavior escalations. And we were kind of like watching them process through this. And there was another kiddo. So there were like 3 kids in the same year that she was diagnosed that all went to the same school that were diagnosed with it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's surprising.
It was very, very unusual. And so for her, what we saw was a huge increase in anxiety. And we had, so she's highly sensitive, and we've always, kind of questioned, is she, a little bit on the spectrum? We're not sure. But we saw these huge behavior escalations where it was just like someone whose brain was on fire. And that's like the best way that people describe PANDAS is like the level of dysregulation is disproportionate to the child. Like it's just this extreme escalation. So, she would be hitting and kicking, screaming, like just screaming. She would have repeating words, which I now recognize was like almost like tics at the time. She started bedwetting again, and she actually had handwriting regressions. So we noticed that, like, not only was there this huge increase in anxiety, there was also she started making a lot of like dark statements too, which at the time she was 6, and she was making, statements that were very, very dark. And, we were looking into, is there something at school? And there was nothing, and at home we were like, what is going on? So dark statements, handwriting regressions, the bedwetting, the verbal tics, the behavior escalations would literally take both my husband and I to kind of like calm her back down. And we would have to switch out because it was such a level of dysregulation that we were both struggling to stay calm and stay regulated and just hold space for that, because all you can do is be a stable base and ride it out. And so when we ended up taking her in, I ended up like driving across the metro to see a practitioner that I knew well. And she ended up, we think it was PANS, but we know that PANDAS is also probably part of the picture because strep had been a big one. But at the time, we had COVID, and then she was very positive. Her titers for Epstein-Barr mono were actually off the chart, and mine were as well. So again, we don't know. We just know she had this really high viral load, and she definitely still had strep. And, as we've moved and the kids have now been healthier, we still see that, like, when she gets a virus, she every night kind of asks us, am I going to die? Am I going to have a heart attack? I don't think you're going to die. There's a lot of kind of like ritualistic behaviors that still have persisted, even though they're significantly better. But it was, just in extreme escalation. And there was food intolerances, food avoidance, textures. We couldn't have any tags in her clothing. So many of those things, extreme, like almost ARFID type behaviors with food. It was very, very, very unusual. And it would be a complete 180 from how she was when she was healthy, really.
That is so interesting. Like, so many things that you're saying are just like, sparking things for me in my brain. When you said dark thoughts, when he first started presenting all of these things, he was talking about like a ghost in our house. He was saying that a ghost was taking, he didn't say ghost, he called it ope or something. He had this word for it, and he said that entity or whatever every night would take him and lock him underneath the staircase, and like the guy had both of his hands cut off and stuff, just like these really odd things. So that sparked something for me.
Yeah. Man, and that, like, so much of it, don't you like look at your kids and you're like, I wonder, because like when you see your kids go through certain things, I think it sometimes takes you back to like your own experience as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And even as you're saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember just like bizarre dreams and such strange things, like, as a kid too.
Yeah.
But it's a wild, wild journey for sure. And that was, again, our biggest wake up when we moved out of our house, was seeing that the kids were healthy and resilient and weren't getting sick as much, because we know mold just knocks the immune system down and makes it so much easier for these viruses to just run rampant in an already weakened immune system.
Yeah, that's so true. Sorry, skipping back to something else that stood out to me is when you said you mentioned your own childhood. And I know that I lived in a mold house when I was in my teenage years, and because there were mushrooms literally growing out of my closet.
Oh my gosh. I've heard this before.
Mm-hmm. And I developed a whole, slew of symptoms, which is for another episode, but specifically I developed misophonia.
Mm-hmm.
And and that is under the can be under the umbrella of OCD. And so at the age of like whatever, in my teenage years, I developed misophonia, and that comes in and out of my life depending on my environment or my stress load. So yeah, it's so weird that it's similar to what my son has, but yeah, comes and goes. And so for him, yeah, I can only hope that once we get to a healthier place that that will go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there any other like behaviors, school things, sleep things that like really impacted like how you parented and like, helping him kind of navigate this?
We threw everything at him to try to help. We've been through therapies. We've thrown every supplement at him. We've probably spent so much on supplements. He is on sertraline, so medication. What has helped the most, what I've noticed the difference the most with is a better environment, because although he is still struggling with this, it kind of, so I'll say like about a year ago, he wouldn't even ever have a good day. He might have a couple good hours, but he did not have any good days. And now he has mostly good days, but he'll have bad days, and he'll go into flares. So he's still struggling with this, but it's kind of a night and day difference. But what helped the most was getting out of the environment and neurofeedback. Yeah. We have noticed that neurofeedback has helped a ton. Maybe his antidepressant, although it's hard to say because I don't know about you, but I have a hard time just changing one thing at a time, and I just try to fix it all at once.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Legit. Oh yeah. And then you're like, I don't know, it changed. I did 6 variables at once, but
Yep.
something's working, so now they all have to stay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's being a mom. Yeah. That's like let's normalize that experience for a sec.
Yep, exactly. So
Yeah.
I know that the neurofeedback has helped. I know fixing the environment, although that's still up for debate. We're kind of still tweaking our environment, but he'll have flares, and the flares actually match up with our own now. So it's like, okay, this is environmental. Like something in our environment has thrown things off. Like maybe it rains, and so now we're all in a flare, and he is in a flare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about you? What kind of treatments have you tried?
So for initially, it's kind of crazy because, noticing she was very sensitive from infancy. Actually, what tripped us up, which now, like, again, as I've kind of been able to roll it X backward, what tripped us up to her having MCAS was actually that she had severe reactions to vaccines, which we had broken up, kind of in the beginning. But we ended up taking her to like the U of M, just a whole bunch of different places because she had these horrible vaccine reactions. And, which that's a whole different discussion. But then she was the one that seemed to present the most with weird skin issues at our house, weird cognitive things. Like I said, our environment affected all of us differently. My husband really had a GI presentation. I was kind of every single body system that could go down did. One of the twins had respiratory, and my son had headaches and nosebleeds. But Kaya, again, what we started with was first trying to give behavioral support, because at first we didn't realize it was PANDAS. So we did a lot of, interventions at schools. She had always been in occupational therapy and physical therapy. So we kind of had those therapies for her because the twins were preemie also. So we did a lot of like behavioral interventions at first. And same thing, I was like, biocidin, gut support, immune support. And then it just kind of evolved. But man, what did we do for her? I think a lot of gut support, so a lot of like mucosal barrier support. The biggest thing that helped, same thing, was environmental change. And as we're in the same spot where I'm like, hey, you see my tent behind me, our house is still being remediated for the, fourth, fifth, whatever it is time. We're certainly not in a perfect environment, but changing the environment and being able to have something that is lower load was definitely the most influential. The biggest thing we noticed was when we started camping and she stopped having meltdowns, and we were like, holy cow, like there's something to this. And it's been kind of, I would say, a steady decline over, we've been in this journey now for 2 years. So we've seen a steady improvement over 2 years, to the point that I don't really supplement the kids a ton anymore. But in the first year, same thing. I was like, here's some Pectisol, here's some sun fiber, here's some, biocidin, here's some Settle and Soothe. I mean, it was just kind of like everything that could be thrown in. And what actually had me back off was MCAS was very much superimposed on top of PANDAS. So we couldn't do too much. And it's the same, similar presentation to me, where we couldn't do that much or it would put her into a flare. So a lot of behavioral interventions, just supports to help with dysregulation and help with emotional support at school, sensory, help with the sensory processing side of things. A lot of normalizing the behavior and or I don't want to say normalizing, but you can't punish someone out of dysregulation, right? You can't dysregulate someone out of dysregulation. So really trying to learn how to parent a child that had different sensory needs, because that doesn't fall under the scope of parenting a child that is more neurotypical, right? So having to do a lot of that, and then just immune support, gentle herbal tinctures, trying to prioritize a healthy diet for her as much as you can with this, now 9-year-old. But
Yeah.
really, environmental change was absolutely hands down the biggest one for us too. That was the one where we saw the most growth and the most. Most of the time, like, I forget unless she gets a virus. And when some of these behaviors, kind of like OCD type behaviors, surface, most of the time I forget that she is affected by this, because she has come so far in this time. Like, we actually saw, since she's a twin, I think there's always a certain amount of comparison, but they were literally at opposite ends of the spectrum, which you can have in terms of learning with two siblings anyway. But she actually made the most leaps and bounds that I've ever seen academically, which could have just been her process too. But we saw big, like, neurocognitive changes this past year too, just with being in better environments.
Yeah. I noticed that too with my son's grades. You can kind of see them fluctuating with his flares.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see flares coming?
Now we do. Because it'll usually start with a lot of the emotion dysregulation will be the first thing we see. Usually that will be the first thing. And then a day later, like, we'll notice something like a cough or, a viral thing. And myself being super prone to flares too, it's kind of similar to what you described also, where one of us, she's also, I would say, the barometer. I would say she and I are probably the two that are the most barometers of the family in terms of something being off. But yeah, we typically see like a set constellation of symptoms where it'll start with really big behavioral outbursts that are kind of disproportionate to the situation, where it doesn't usually cause that. We'll tend to see some like food avoidance. GI issues tend to be another one. So those tend to be the ways that they present for her, will be like GI, some neurocognitive stuff, and then a little bit of like more picky, I would say, behavior around foods as well. What about you?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So this no longer happens with him because, as he's healing, he's kind of taking on sicknesses a little bit better. Although right now he's actually in a really bad flare. But anyway, during the worst of it, the weirdest thing, one day he would be this, like, out of nowhere, he would start being this like sweet angel and just so childlike. So he was regressing kind of in age, and he would
Mm.
he would call me mama instead of mom. So he was just like a little baby, and he wouldn't act like, a typical, whatever his age was at the time. He was acting a lot younger than he actually was. So a lot of regression, but just so sweet and childlike or baby like. And finally we realized, oh, in the next day or two, he's going to flare. And then, yeah, with the regression would come like a lot of questions like, is this going to kill me? Is this going to kill me? Is this going to kill me?
Yes. That was the number one thing that we would see too. It's
Yeah.
so crazy.
Yeah. And then a day or two later would come extreme aggression, just like extreme aggression. He was, at the very worst, he was very violent, but he has also come a long way too. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of amazed by these kids because for, where they were or what they've gone through, the fact that I just feel like they have more self-awareness than most adults at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We definitely we ended up putting, well, and also just, if we can backtrack to where we were at the beginning of the episode, just because of all the housing instability that we've had too, we ended up putting, my work has a great therapy benefit where you can get like 25 sessions for each of your family members per year, which is amazing. And we ended up putting her in therapy too, and we were very like specific about how we phrased it too. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, this is to build your resilience and your coping skills and your support systems. And one thing we've noticed too is she's like done an amazing job in terms of being able to ask other people for support, where sometimes she does shut down, and we see this where she really kind of like, if someone doesn't approach her, she kind of will avoid them. But I think we've seen a better job of, or not a better job. I've tried to like detach any judgment words. I don't ever want it to sound like that, but we've seen her growth in terms of being able to ask for what she needs or identify some of these things herself too, which I think as anyone, like as an adult that deals with chronic illness, being able to advocate for what you need and name what's going on is a key to staying regulated in the experience, because it feels very outside of your control. And we see her, like she's a gymnast and she loves her gymnastics, and that has been something that has given her life. And so being able to see her utilize some of these skills has been a really cool experience too.
I agree. Yeah, it amazes me. I don't know. We're kind of working on the same thing with my son, is him being able to recognize, and he actually does say like, oh, this is the pandas. And so yeah, to be able to name it and identify it just kind of blows me away. So
Yeah. Did you have a lot of like conflict? I mean, I'm going to speak to my own marital conflict here, but did you guys have a lot of like initial marital conflict in terms of like how to handle parenting this? Cuz I feel like we had a real steep learning curve personally. In terms of learning, like bridging that gap in terms of how can we co-parent this in a successful way, with someone that requires both of us at times to be on the same page. What was that like for you?
yeah, and I will even open that up, and because as we've been talking, something that's been weighing on me heavily is, and I want to say this and admit this because I don't think I am the only one. I did not properly handle this at first.
Oh, 1,000%.
I admittedly blamed him for a lot of this because I thought it was behavioral at first. And going through therapy with him has taught me a lot how to handle it. And honestly, I had to mature with him. And I've become more self-regulated because of what he has gone through, because I finally learned that the best thing that I can do for him, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying, like what has worked the most, and I realized the best thing that I can do for him is regulate myself and figure out how to regulate myself. And yeah, so that's kind of the biggest change that has happened. The best thing or the best thing for him has been me self-regulating. But I just want to say that I horribly handled this at first. And so did my husband at times. And yes, we had a lot of conflicts around how to handle this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like, I'm going to own it too, because I think having a child that has special needs, it actually taught me how dysregulated I was and how minimal my tolerance for distress and kids being kids was, and how much I needed to heal myself. Because I used to be a parent that was extremely reactive and screams, and I hate that. I hate admitting that. It's so painful, but yeah, it really forced me to look inward and find my calm and be like, their dysregulation is not like, sometimes it is a reflection of my internal state and I need to calm myself, and sometimes it is independent of me, and all I can do is be their sturdy base. Like, I think that was my number one takeaway, was be a sturdy base, like be their lighthouse, be their port in a storm, that they know that you are unwavering in your love, your support, your consistency. But and then repair too. Like, it taught me so much on repair, like going back and saying, hey, I'm really sorry. This is what I was feeling in my body. This is
Yeah.
how they showed up. And this does not mean you are bad. This is what I experienced, and I'm really sorry that this showed up for you. And so, I think it's taught me so much on repair and not minimizing their experience. And yeah, it really forces you to level up and work on your own stuff. Like, it's
Yes.
wild. Yeah.
Yes, it used to spin me out. It used to set me off. I mean, because at the worst of it, and kind of to give ourselves credit, like at the worst of it, it was all day, every day, without a break. And the only relief I would ever get is when I went to sleep. And it was really hard and straining. But
Mhm.
yeah, it used to spin me out. And even like when I would see him in the morning, I know, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, I would get set off so easily. But as to what you were saying, I've really learned to apologize. And I think, we're just human, and so we're not going to be the best of parents all the time. But if we can apologize, I think that shows so much. And my son is so good at apologizing too, um, because of all of this. I don't know. It's like just a giant therapy session. I don't know how to explain it, but it really has, through the struggles and the horrible parenting and the mental health struggles we've all faced, like we are becoming better versions of ourselves, and that has been a gift. But it didn't come without so much horrific struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling you, I I'm gonna admit, like, there were times that I was like, I'm I'm kind of looking forward to not being alive anymore, because this is just too hard for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like, I feel like one of the hardest things was feeling like you lost your child, like you
Mhm.
losing your child, like feeling like you aren't going to get them back.
Yep.
And feeling like you lose pieces of yourself and like your own sanity on this journey. It's one of the most gutting things, and it's so isolating because a lot of people don't understand chronic illness. A lot of people don't understand mold. A lot of people don't understand that once it's past, it's not past, right? Like it is an ongoing thing, and it's flares, and it's all of these pieces that ebb and flow, and your bandwidth is different. And I think that was one of the most healing things, was being able to connect with, our group of friends and other people through social media too, because it became this support network, this place of holding where you weren't expected to show up a certain way. And we love each other. We check on each other. We understand all these things are true and really hard, and they impact everything and your entire family. It causes ripples, which is just wild, honestly.
Yeah, it did affect the entire family. I admit that at one point, not only was our house toxic, but everyone in the family, it was just like a toxic environment. And we've healed a lot. But yeah, going back to the isolation that you spoke of too, I it was hurtful because a lot of people told me, oh, kids are hard. Kids are hard.
Yeah.
Boys are hard. This is just a phase. Very invalidating. And that has been, and I still kind of carry the hurt of that, because there wasn't anything normal about that. Like, my child is suffering and I am suffering, and this is not normal.
And so many families, like, I think we were fortunate that, like, me working in medical, right? Like, I've been fortunate on this entire journey to know the people to connect with, to know the people to reach out to be able to run, my own testing. But I think of how many families just get put through the ringer in terms of being told it's something with your parenting, it's something, I don't know, just thinking that there isn't a root cause, or being, oh gosh, gaslit basically for what's going on with their child, and being told that it's normal when they see that their child is suffering. And being able to see the healing evolution, where I'm like, man, I just, my heart goes out to the families that are looking for answers and can't find their answers, or can't, not that there's one root cause. A lot of times there's multiple, and there's genetic setups, and there's so many things, right? But being able to have someone to work with them that can help peel back some of those layers and tease some of those pieces out, that is everything, right? And that validation that, like, you are doing okay as a parent, like, you are not alone, and this is hard. I think what you said is so true too, because it does get exhausting. And especially if you're dealing with your own health stuff on top of it, and financial stresses, like, it gets very dark. And I think being able to just have someone hold a candle, like, just hold that hope that it can be better than it is. It might not be perfect, but it can be a couple of steps better, and there is hope. And that is so important. And I think that's what all of us stand for, is that belief that there is still hope, even if you're in the dark.
Yeah, I want to echo that there is hope. And even though we are having our struggles, or my son is still struggling, oh my gosh, it is bearable now, and life is worth living again. And yeah, I feel so much relief compared to where we're at. So there are answers. And so if anyone is going through this, you're not alone, and there will be relief. You cannot stay at the status quo where you're at the very bottom forever. Yeah. You will find answers. And unfortunately, the hard thing about it is that someone else's answer is probably not going to be yours. Everyone is so individual, and kids with pandas, that's no exception.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. That is so true. I'm going to take your hope, and I'm going to channel that into all of this as well, because it's just, man, when you're going through all this stuff, you need your people. You need your people that can understand and just keep holding light for all of this, for sure.
We touched on that in our 15 minutes that weren't recorded. But I just want to say to you that I was, and I know this is not your first remediation, so you already know this, but it's hard to remember when you're in it. But I remember the being in limbo, and it feels like it is lasting forever. And it's so dysregulating being in limbo. So I my heart goes out to you right now.
Well, yeah, because we had the 15 minutes that weren't recorded, but like we're doing the same thing we did this time last year where we're taking our tent and we're going and touring state parks again. And I'm like, my gosh, this is what we were doing last year when we had sold our house, and now we're doing it because we can't remediate until July or August. And a lot of that is because we've taken it as far as we can do with our self remediation, basically. And at this point, we are, going to hire someone else that can do a little bit more, but it's all a wing and a prayer. Like it's you never have a guarantee of anything. But we feel pretty comfortable with the company at this point. I've toured all the companies in the Midwest, so if anyone needs recommendation, I can't necessarily give it, but I can tell you our experiences with various companies because we've worked with many. But it is hard. It is hard because you're just choosing to continue to have faith and show up every day and have hope for a future and practice financial abundance when there is none, or feels like there is none. And it's a very gutting, isolating experience there too, because I know people keep asking us like, your house passed, and it's like, yep, but then we found something, like, it's just it's a crazy experience.
Yeah, I think people don't quite understand your house passed, but it doesn't really give a full picture, because when they're going through remediation, it's in containment, and they clean it down, do find small particle clean the area, so it's kind of not easy to pass, but it's not taking the full scope of maybe what's behind that area or something. So even though you passed, it doesn't mean that the whole situation of the house is taken care of. So
yeah, well, and you got me beat. Ours wasn't fully in containment either, so because there's different standards there. So
yep,
yeah,
that's
it's you know what, it is, that's a whole nother discussion, and that's okay. So I'm glad we got to talk about this today. I feel like we could very easily do a part 2 on this. But yeah, our hope with this episode is that for anyone whose child is having behavioral issues that can't be explained, regressions, unusual things, if you haven't considered environment, please consider your environment. If you haven't considered PANDAS, viral re-exposures, it's basically it's all under the umbrella of immune dysregulation and neuroinflammation. So, looking at some of these pieces, but also knowing that this is not necessarily going to be the end for you. Like, this can also be so much better when you begin to peel back some of those layers, and that hope and healing are so possible.
Yes. And I guess my parting thing is, be your own child's advocate. And don't stop with what people are telling you, because I was one of the families that you were speaking of. I'm not really in the medical world, so I had to dig for answers, fight for answers, and fight against people in our world that were telling us that this was all normal.
Yep.
And stuff. So yeah, just keep looking for answers, be your child's own advocate, have faith in yourself, because you know your child the best. But as Dani was saying, there is hope at the end of it. You can find answers. You can become empowered, and there will be healing. And I think there's a better version of yourself in there. I'm happier with myself as a parent now than I was before, and so there's hope there.
Yep. Awesome, Baylie. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we got to do this. I'm bummed our initial 15 minutes weren't on here, but we have many, many future conversations coming forward. So thank you all for listening. If this helped you, please hit like, subscribe, send it to your friends, send it to anyone that needs help, healing, hope, anyone that can benefit from following along with this journey.
All right. Thanks. Bye, Dani.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Sporecast. If something in this episode resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. And we'll see you next time.